Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider his ways and be wise. This was a verse that was drilled into me from a young age as a way of combating the sin of sloth. Most of us, when we think of sloth, we either think of a slow-moving mammal, or we're thinking about simple laziness. And laziness here meaning simply a refusal to work hard, or, a sort of cutting corners kind of a thing. The kind of thing that Proverbs chapter 6 talks about, where, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will be upon you like an armed man. If we want to get ahead, we should work. Well, certainly that's a good bit of practical wisdom, but when it comes to the sin of sloth, we're talking about something slightly different. We're talking about spiritual sloth, a certain spiritual lethargy that leaves us not really choosing. It's the sin of the people in Laodicea who Jesus describes in Revelation chapter 3 as neither hot nor cold. They are lukewarm. I will spit you out. The image that comes to mind here is one that I read recently because I'm teaching through the Divine Comedy. And in Canto 3, Dante goes into the first chamber in hell. This is before you get to hell proper, but we're still in sort of we're in like the waiting room of hell. And we find certain people there. And what they're doing is that they are chasing after a banner, okay? There's a mob of people, and they're chasing after a banner that forever eludes them. And they're being driven onward by a horde of wasps. They are stuck in this cycle of being driven by one thing and pursuing another, and never being able to escape from the one or catch the other. And here is what Dorothy Sayers has to say about this image. The vestibule is the abode of the weathercock mind, the vague tolerance which will neither approve nor condemn, the cautious cowardice for which no decision is ever final. The spirits rush aimlessly after the aimlessly whirling banner, stung and goaded as of old, by the thought that, in doing anything definite whatsoever, they are missing doing something else. Or to quote the late, great Neil Peart, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. The choice of indecision, or rather, the conscious refusal to choose. May I say that sloth seems to be fairly endemic to our society. Many, particularly in my generation, I feel that we are reluctant to nail ourselves down to any particular place or community. We don't seem to want always to put down roots as much as people in the past have. We want to be ready to be able to move and go to a completely new place as soon as we can. And we have an economy that encourages this kind of attitude. Sloth is a sin that is taking a very different form in our society. It's that refusal to commit because something else might come up. Something else better. Now, sometimes sloth takes the form of procrastination, but, the most chronic procrastinators I know are also incredibly productive because they put that procrastination to good use. That's not really what it's talking about when we talk about sloth. It's more of this refusal to commit for fear of overcommitting sometimes. I know I suffer from this. How many times do I say no to something because I'm like, I just need some me time, I need just to sit down on the couch, a couple nights a week and, put on some Netflix and, have a nice drink and, do all that. I just need some self-care, But if I let that attitude develop, if I keep going with that attitude, first of all, I don't do anything. I don't do anything that doesn't pay me. And I lose human contact. I get absorbed in myself or in my own enjoyment. I don't do anything in particular. I feel incredibly busy. I say, oh no, I need to free up some time because I'm way overcommitted. But I'm not really. I'm making excuses, and so I end up not doing anything productive at all. It's that easy road to hell that C.S. Lewis describes in the Screwtape Letters. The road to hell that is gradual, where you don't notice that you're on it. And then when you get there, you've realized that not only are you in hell, but you got there not by doing anything you particularly wanted to do. And in Dante describes this as these souls are not good enough for heaven. They have damned themselves. But hell itself despises them. It spits them out. They're in this in-between place in the vestibule or the antechamber of hell because they didn't make any conscious choice. They just let themselves get damned. What Scripture calls us to is something far different. It's watchfulness. Be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. If there's a lion on the prowl, you want to be aware. You want to be alert. Jesus also has the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins. The wise virgins are prepared. They are prepared. They are not slothful. They're not just putting off being ready until it's too late. They've brought the extra that they need to await the coming of the bridegroom. That's our posture as Christians. It's the failure to deal with problems that constitutes sloth. Sloth is not simply, sleeping in on Saturday morning, once in a while. That's not what sloth's about. It's about putting off decisions, putting off the difficult work, and putting it off indefinitely, never getting around to doing what you really wanted to do, what you really needed to do. I've seen problems develop in churches where, there was a problem in the church that nobody really wanted to deal with. Didn't want to talk about it. They knew it was going to be a problem, but they were like, oh, well, we'll talk about that later. The next meeting, we'll talk about that. But, the next meeting when we talk about that never comes. And it keeps not coming until the whole thing explodes. The problem just gets worse. It's like, when you've got it's like, not changing your bandage. You've got a bad cut, you've got a bandage over it, and you really don't want to rip that thing off. That's going to hurt. You got some, if you're like me, I got hairy arms, and so, you rip that bandage off, it's going to hurt. But the longer you wait to change that bandage, the longer you wait to rip it off, the worse that underlying problem is going to get. You've got to rip that thing off so that it can heal properly. So you can put some, good disinfectant in there and, a new bandage and get that taken care of. The sin of sloth is simply in that. It's in being so conflict averse, so dedicated to not leaving, it's standing in, with two roads in front of you and not being able to decide which road to take. And so you stand there until you perish. was a great. It's not knowing what you want or what you ought to want. It's not taking the time to evaluate, not taking the time to examine your life, to know what your mission is. That's the sin of sloth.